You'd be surprised at how quickly things escalate from rumors to complete mayhem. Because has suddenly exploded into something that no one in the room was prepared for, having begun as quiet talk behind the scenes. Following Bambi's startling allegations about Mendeecees Harris, rumors have been making the rounds on social media and among musicians that Yandy Smith had finally spoken up. We're not claiming that any of genuinely took place. However, these are the kinds of stories that are currently being discussed and the reactions are becoming more strong since. According to reports, the vibe in the room entirely changed the instant everything came out. Once calm people now appeared uncomfortable. All eyes moved to Yandy as if they were waiting for her to say anything to break the tension, and conversation stopped in mid-sentence. However, it is said that she remained silent rather than leaping in right away, which only made matters worse. Many fans are asking the same question after being surprised by the song. What is she withholding? Then appeared, and it was the turning point. According to sources, Yandy's answer was unexpected when she eventually spoke. What should have been a straightforward explanation music quickly evolved into something far more profound as emotions ran high and voices were raised. It felt more personal than just defending someone. It seemed as if tension that had been building for years had suddenly surfaced. In the meantime, Bambi's version of events is still gaining traction, with people on the internet taking sides and disputing every aspect. While some think she went too far, others are certain that what she stated has more reality than anyone cares to acknowledge. Mendeecees is in the center of it all, and many claim that his response music only fueled the flames rather than soothing them down. Everyone is split on the situation. Loyalty is being tried, friendships are being called into question, and the tension is so intense that you can just feel it through the screen. And what transpired next could be the most combustible element of this whole narrative. If these reports are anything close to what actually happened, you could sense that something greater was lurking beneath the surface as soon as things began to take shape. It wasn't just a minor misunderstanding or a straightforward argument that was being discussed. It was complex, disorganized, and intensely intimate. Yandy Smith was sitting there attempting to maintain her cool while everything around her gradually descended into chaos, according to what has been said online. The strain did not appear suddenly. At first, everyone in the room shifted in their seats as it built up in little, unpleasant moments. It appeared to be a typical conversation in which participants spoke over one another while maintaining a certain level of civility. However, it is said that Bambi then mentioned some music, which instantly altered the mood. At first, it was a statement that held weight rather than being loud or combative. People claimed that for a little moment, the room fell silent for as if everyone was attempting to take in what had just been stated. Everything felt heavier because of that pause, that moment of silence. You could really picture the glances that were exchanged, the covert glances, and the way that people avoided making eye contact while acting as though nothing important had just come up. However, the reality is that once you say something like that aloud, you can't go back. Additionally, the way people are responding indicates that whatever was said struck a chord, even though we are merely discussing news and what is making the rounds online. Then all eyes turn to Mendeecees Harris, because, of course, when his name is spoken, people anticipate a reaction. However, it is being said that he took a moment to hold back rather than plunging right in. It seemed as though he was debating how far he wanted to take it. People were even more intrigued by that hesitation alone, because it normally indicates that there is more going on than meets the eye when someone does not immediately answer. Why? Yandy, conversely, appeared to be torn between two sides of the same storm. Online users claimed that her body language conveyed more information than her words ever could. Although she appeared composed on the surface, it was evident from her expression that she was considering every scenario before she spoke. Because they are accustomed to seeing her intervene swiftly, defend, explain, and take charge of the situation, fans are taken aback. But as the discussion went on, it felt different. This time, according to reports, the energy changed from controlled tension to something far more acute. Bambi refused to back down and leaned into the music rather than easing her posture. Some claim that she stated her point so many times that it was hard to ignore. It seemed as though she wanted to ensure that no one could act as though they hadn't heard it the first time. It was the repetition of the song that turned the awkward moment into an explosive one. The reactions in the room could no longer be concealed at that time. According to reports, some people were astonished. Others appeared to have anticipated the release of. The scenario was further complicated by subtle replies, side remarks, and whispers. It was now about everything going on surrounding the music, not simply what was being spoken directly. The time eventually arrived for Mendeecees to respond. According to what is being discussed, his reaction was unexpectedly emotional rather than composed and calculated. It was more than just self-defense. Sounded like long simmering frustration. The scenario felt even more urgent and real when emotions were running high like that. Yandy's response to the incident is what gets people talking, even though we are merely discussing reports and what people are saying happened. Rather than intervening right away to defuse the situation, she reportedly remained silent for a bit longer than anticipated. People wondered what she was thinking during that pause, which increased the tension. Was she taking it all in? Was she choose her words carefully? Or was there something she was holding back on saying? That particular moment has caused division among fans. While some are certain that quiet speaks louder than words, others think her stillness was an attempt to avoid making things worse. And in circumstances like this, where every glance and every pause is scrutinized, can make even the smallest response into a major talking point. The lines between sides began to form as the discourse continued. Individuals started to convey their opinions by their reactions, facial expressions, and responses to every aspect of the conversation, though not necessarily in an outward manner. It became more about everything that had been developing behind the scenes and less about a single statement. According to reports, Bambi's single quote-s tone remained strong, which only increased the strain. She didn't seem to be concerned in softening her words or altering their perception. Rather, she stood by it, and her self-assurance heightened the intensity of the moment. Everyone else is compelled to react, whether they want to or not, when someone speaks in such a manner. Mendeecees' response, meanwhile, kept escalating the conflict. People claimed that immediately he began speaking, did not hold back. And that kind of energy has the power to swiftly escalate a heated discussion into a full-fledged altercation. He seemed to be reacting to more than just the present situation, and it was no longer only about protecting himself. Yandy finally started to change in the midst of all of this. You could tell by the description of that she was getting to the point where she could no longer remain silent. Everyone around her is putting pressure on her, paying attention to her, and expecting. It all culminated in her having to speak. When she did speak, it was not loud or hostile, but it had weight. Her statements are said to have been deliberate, measured, and thoughtful. Even so, her solution did not resolve issues as some had anticipated. It seemed to raise additional inquiries rather than diffuse the situation. That's why it's so intense to observe this entire situation, because each response seems to raise a new query. Nothing seems clear-cut or easy, and each reply adds another layer. Everyone is paying attention to the way it is developing, even if we are only talking about what is being published and what others are saying online. And as the discussion went on, it became evident that this was not going to be settled in a single instant, because emotions do not simply vanish once they reach that point and are expressed aloud. They remain, they stay, and all that follows is shaped by them. Furthermore, the mood did not quiet down as many had thought. As soon as she finished speaking, rather, everything seemed to constrict even more, as if everything had gotten to the point where each sentence had two meanings. Those who were already observing intently leaned closer, attempting to capture not only the words, but also the manner in which they were spoken. Because tone is just as important as words in situations like this. According to what people have been sharing, Yandy Smith maintained a steady voice. But there was a certain edge to it that made it obvious that she was speaking from a place that had been developing over time, rather than just speaking for the moment. It wasn't the typical defensive. It seemed deliberate, even intentional. Every word she spoke would be scrutinized the moment it left her mouth, as if she knew. And it came out of her mouth. Just that caused the attention to return to her. Because what Bambi had stated earlier was no longer the only thing at stake. It has to do with Yandy's decision regarding how to react. Additionally, she apparently addressed it in a way that allowed for interpretation rather than abruptly ending it. Fans are taken aback because they anticipated a convincing defense or a blatant denial. However, what they received felt more nuanced than that. Based on what was being said, a few people in the room began exchanging glances once more. They seemed to be attempting to read between the lines. Such reactions are what sustain such circumstances, because individuals begin to fill in the blanks on their own when things are not stated clearly. The narrative then takes on a life of its own. Then there was yet another surprising turn of events. Bambi apparently leaned even more into the incident rather than retreating. According to these stories, her tone remained hard and nearly unwavering, which increased the tension. She didn't violently interrupt, but when she did speak again, it was just as, if not more, important. She didn't even need to raise her voice to double down. People are constantly playing songs from that period on the internet because it clearly divided people. While some believe she went too far, others believe she was standing her position. You can see how rapidly opinions began to form right there in that split. The family was split up on social media as well as in the room. Meanwhile, Mendeecees Harris was no longer holding back. His energy apparently changed from controlled frustration to something much more direct as he fully entered the argument. People claim that he spoke more quickly and sharply. It seemed as though he was attempting to stop before it became worse. However, it seemed to increase the intensity rather than put a stop to the situation. His response to was particularly noteworthy because of how intimate it began to feel. It was no longer only about reacting to what was stated at that precise moment or clearing his name. He seemed to be addressing a tension that had been building below the music for some time. Furthermore, feelings that are that intense do not remain confined for very long. Hearing all of this apparently caused Yandy to change once more. It was more noticeable this time. Her expression allegedly shifted, not significantly, but enough for those who were paying attentively to notice. It was the kind of subdued response that says a lot, particularly when every little detail is being meticulously monitored. She intervened once more, but this time in a different way. Rather of being calm and detached, is said to have given her remarks a more intimate tone. It was no longer about shutting people down. She seemed to be attempting to seize hold of the story before it entirely escaped her grasp. People were surprised by the change. More than anything else, fans are divided about this particular moment. Some others think she was at last being genuine, speaking honestly rather than strategically. Some believe it brought up even greater issues, because her approach to the situation did not match their expectations. And when people's expectations are not fulfilled, they begin to look further. That same gap was reflected in the responses throughout the room. While some appeared even more uncertain than before, others seemed to soften, as if they knew where she was coming from. Tension is maintained by this kind of conflicting reaction, since there isn't a definitive conclusion or moment when everything is resolved. And then, just as was about to settle down, another layer was introduced. People claim that side remarks started to appear. They weren't loud enough to dominate the conversation, but they were prominent enough to have an impact. Because they influence how everyone else reacts, those tiny reactions and murmurs are more significant than most people realize. According to reports, Bambi's response to Yandy's second response remained steady. She didn't appear shocked or shaken. Instead, she appeared composed. Her presence felt even more powerful at that precise moment because of her constancy. Another type of pressure arises when someone does not respond as others anticipate. Conversely, Mendeecees seems to have reached a point where it was no longer possible to hold back. People claim that he became even more blunt in his tone, as if he had had enough of the back and forth. However, it increased confusion rather than clarity. Because the more he talked, the more people began to wonder what was going on. At this point, the situation got even more difficult. Because at this point, it wasn't just about what was being stated at the time. It was also about how everything related to potential past events. The way people are responding implies that there is a larger story underlying all of this, even though we are only talking about what is being published and discussed online. Online fans have used this moment to spark countless conversations. Some are dissecting each word, pause, and expression. Others are taking sides without thinking twice. There are also some who think that the truth lies somewhere in the middle, concealed behind the cacophony. Nothing feels definitive, which is what makes this scenario so compelling. Every time it appears that there could be some clarity, the attention is once again shifted by a different response, statement, or detail. It's similar to attempting to put together something whose shape changes every time you look at it. And it became evident that this was more than a one-time altercation as the tension increased. People's reactions, the mood in the room, and the things that were said and left unsaid all suggested that the situation was far from done. Because the story doesn't end when feelings get to that point and lines begin to emerge. It only becomes more profound. And everything that individuals believe to be true about this situation could be altered by what happens next. The situation did not calm down as anyone had anticipated once that sensation took hold. Rather, it began to fall apart in a way that made reading even more difficult. New reactions started to emerge as more people attempted to interpret what had already been spoken. It seemed as though the discussion had taken on a life of its own. The way little things suddenly become important was what made even more emotional. Yandy Smith did not take back after her previous response, according to what people have been saying. Rather, she continued to be involved, but in a more subdued and perceptive manner. She seemed to be keeping a tight eye on everything, gauging every response before determining the next course of action. Without saying a word, that kind of presence has the power to change a room. People in her immediate vicinity apparently sensed that shift, but Bambi did not retreat either. If anything, strengthened her position. There was a firmness in the way she handled herself that made it evident she was not backing down from anything she had already put out there, even though she wasn't raising her voice or causing disruption in the obvious sense. And occasionally, that quiet assurance can speak louder than any disagreement. After that, there was another instance that people on the internet kept bringing up. The discussion apparently went back to earlier topics rather than continuing in a straight line. However, the energy is different. Things that had previously been mentioned sounded heavier, as if they had greater significance now that emotions had been revealed through. It felt less like an argument and more like a real-time, intimate process after that change. At that moment, Mendeecees Harris responded once more. These reports also claimed that his tone had shifted again. It wasn't as clear as it had been, but it wasn't quiet either. The music had a controlled feel, but there was still tension beneath that control. People claimed that it sounded like someone was attempting to keep things together, even though they knew they were already falling apart. The matter was further complicated by such a response. Because when someone changes their tone in that way, others start to wonder what's really going on underneath the surface. His energy seemed to switch between frustration and restraint so swiftly that fans were taken aback. And one of the most popular topics of discussion on the internet is this back and forth. When Yandy noticed that change, apparently intervened once more. However, the weight of her remarks was different this time. It sounded like she was dealing with a deeper issue rather than attempting to control the scene or diffuse tension. Some claim that her tone conveyed more than the specific event. It alluded to historical events and things that may not have previously been properly expressed aloud. At that point, the room's reactions to the music apparently got even more polarized. Some folks appeared to get exactly what she was saying, about others appeared perplexed, as if they were listening to a different narrative than the one they believed to be true. In this way, the family was split, not just on an emotional level, but also on how they understood everything that was going on. According to Bambi's single quotes, his response to that change remained consistent. However, did observe a slight shift. Some say she paused for a moment before answering once more. You could sense the weight of everything that had been stated during that gap. When she did speak, it was neither more forceful nor louder. However, it was evident from the direct that she would not allow the story to proceed without her involvement. That reaction put everything back in its proper place, shifting the emphasis from side effects to the main problem. And everyone in the room was unable to remain impartial after that. According to reports, even those who had remained silent up until that time displayed some sort of response, whether it was by facial expressions, brief remarks, or the way they changed their focus.